It's the day after Food Box Day, which means it's time to get cooking. Our box this month was full of all kinds of things that would be great for salads. It's hot, it's summer, it's great salad weather. If you're looking for a salad dressing recipe, there's one of those from a previous month. But I thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different with the produce this month. So we are going to be looking at the carrot greens, not the carrots, the greens. So I hope you didn't throw them out. We're going to do some recipes with the greens, and we're also going to do something with the radishes. Radishes are kind of a spicy flavor, and some people don't particularly like them. In fact, I'm not really a fan either, or I wasn't until I started cooking them. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a cooked radish dish. We also are going to make use of possibly potatoes if you want, red onion if you want. We're definitely going to use that lime, the greens from the carrots, and we might even make use of some of that romaine as well. So grab your produce and let's get cooking. We're going to start with the radishes. So actually what we're going to do with the radishes today is we are going to roast them. So if you kind of are not a fan of that peppery flavor that happens in salads, you might find that you actually like them roasted. So the first thing you got to do is get them out of the bag, give them a wash. And these are pretty small. If yours are fairly small too, just cut them in half and then we'll get roasting. Here are my radishes all cut up. I ended up cutting some in quarters just to try and get them to be somewhat the same size because there were some small ones, some big ones in that package. So you can just do this with the radishes. However, if you want to make this a bigger side dish than just a few radishes, you could add some of the red onion. So I chopped that up fine. I'm going to throw that in. And you could also add some of the potatoes. So I just give that a good scrub, cut it into pieces about the same size as my radish, maybe a little smaller, and I'm going to throw that in together. If you have a larger family, of course, you could add a lot more in than that. And then you're going to put in some oil just to cover. This is about 2 tablespoons here. I may not need it all. So I just want to get each vegetable nicely covered in the oil. That was plenty. And then you're going to season it. So I'm going to use some salt and some pepper. If you have fresh herbs, you could put those in at this point. Rosemary would be really good. Parsley, if you have those maybe growing in your garden. I'm going to use a little Cajun spice on these because that's something that we like. You could also use garlic powder, onion powder, anything that you might have in your spice drawer or spice cabinet. And give that a good sprinkle. Spice it up a little. All right, and once it's all good and covered, you're going to put it in your baking pan. So you might notice I'm using a very small baking pan today. It is hot out. And I don't have air conditioning, and I use my toaster oven quite a bit for cooking when it's this hot. If you have a barbecue, you can use a bigger sheet pan and cook it. Use your barbecue like an oven and cook it outside that way as well. So a couple of tricks to stay cool in this heat wave that we are having. You can pan fry them. It takes a little longer to get them cooked all the way through and then crispy. I really like the stick it in the oven, forget it method. And so that's what I am doing. So you want to make sure that they're really not overlapping or touching as much as possible because you want them to brown on all sides. So spread that out. And then once it's nicely spread out, you're going to put that in the oven at 400 and for about 30 to 40 minutes or until you can stick a fork in and they are super tender. At about halfway through, so at about 20 minutes, I'll stop and give this a stir and then stick it back in the oven until they're done. So there's a nice side dish for whatever it is you're cooking for lunch or dinner. Let's talk carrot tops. If you are like most people, you probably just pull these off your carrots and throw them away. Hopefully you compost them. Maybe you note that they make great stock and put them in your stock bag, but not a lot of people eat they're carrot tops. And yet we know that carrot tops are full of nutrition. They're full of vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, calcium, all kinds of things that are good for you, as in other dark green leafies. So you can eat these raw. You could chop some up and put it in a salad. I've been known to chop some up and throw it in my smoothie, just like I would any other green. But today we're going to do one of my favorite green recipes. We are going to make pesto. Pesto is a great way to use up greens that maybe are left over in your fridge, or you know you're not going to eat them fast enough. It is completely versatile. You can switch up the recipe for whatever you've got in the fridge at the time. And it's a great topping for, hey, say roasted vegetables, like we're roasting our radishes today. It's really good. I use it often for pizza, base for pizza, instead of using tomato sauce. You can use it as a sauce over any kind of protein. So it's very versatile. It freezes really well. So it's one of those things that I always like to have around. So we're going to make a carrot top pesto today. And so to make that, we're going to start with our carrot tops. So a few things about our carrot tops. This doesn't look as good as it's going to in a few minutes. But there are a couple things we need to do before we use our carrot tops. They are full of sand. You probably noticed this. Your green bin is probably full of sand. We know the floor of the Lions Club was full of dirt and sand yesterday from our carrot tops. So you're going to want to give them a really good wash. And we're actually not going to use these big, thick stems. So either before or after washing, you're actually going to take your carrot top and you're going to pull those green leafy bits off. Sometimes you can just kind of run your fingers, I don't want to like that bit either. Run your fingers down and just get the leafy bits. And then these can go in your stock pot. So if you're making stock, I have a bag in the freezer that I collect these kinds of things in. And once I've got a chicken carcass and I go and make stock with, so if you've got one of those, throw them in there. If not, at least compost them. So what we need is about 2 really packed cups of these greens. So you're going to want to get a whole bunch of those. So I'm going to leave that for a second. So you're going to get about 2 cups of that. Then you need 1 cup of another green. So if you have fresh cilantro, fresh basil, fresh parsley, any fresh herb, that would be really good and add extra flavor. But you don't have to have that. So even though pesto is typically made with basil, you don't have to have basil to make pesto. Honestly, it can be done with any greens. So we're going to use the beet greens. And because it was in our box, I'm going to use the lettuce for my other cup of green. Yes, you can make pesto with lettuce. So I'm going to take a couple pieces of that. Again, about a cup packed of lettuce. So we're going to do 2 cups of our carrot tops, 1 cup of another green. Could be lettuce, could be kale, could be spinach, could be a fresh herb, whatever you happen to have. But we have romaine, so why not use it? The other ingredients that we're going to use for the pesto, we're going to use the lime from our box. Traditional pesto is lemon. If you have a lemon around and you want to use that, that's fine too. I'm going to use the lime. You're definitely going to need some garlic, about 2 cloves, 2 good sized cloves. If they're little, throw a few extra in. Throw in more if you like more garlic. I'm going to use 2. These cloves are a good size. And then you need some kind of nut or seed. So today I'm going to use some pumpkin seeds, pepitas. You can use something else if that's what you have. If you happen to have sunflower seeds, or you happen to have nuts, walnuts make really good pesto, pecans, hazelnuts, whatever you happen to have, that's what you can use. So any nut. So even though traditional pesto is pine nuts are ridiculously expensive and I don't buy them very often. Sunflower seeds are often my go-to, but today we're going to mix it up with the pumpkin seeds. So 2 kinds of greens, some kind of citrus, some garlic, that's a must, some kind of seed or nut, and then olive oil. And I don't get too picky about oils usually. I just say use what you have, but in a pesto you really want that flavor of the olive oil in it. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, not processed, has a bit of a olivey tone to it, which really adds to the pesto. So I'm really going to recommend you use olive oil on this and not some kind of bland vegetable oil. And then salt and pepper, and I'm going to throw in a few chilies just to spice things up. You could throw in some other spices, but those are the basic ingredients. A traditional pesto also has Parmesan cheese. I don't cook with cheese, but if you do and you have some on hand, you could throw some of that in too. So let's get our ingredients together and let's start making pesto. The one kitchen tool that you definitely do need to make pesto is a food processor. So I am using my food processor today. I have made pesto in a blender. It's a little more finicky and a lot more pushing down and trying to get the ingredients to get near the blades. You can often find food processors in thrift stores or on places like Facebook Marketplace. People buy them and find they aren't using them and then give them away or sell them off. So perhaps if you don't have one, you can find one at a good price that way. I saved up a long time for this one, but I use it all the time and it's been totally worth it. So I've got my washed lettuce and carrot tops in here, 2 cups of carrot tops, a cup of lettuce in here. And then to that, I'm adding 1/3 of a cup of my pumpkin seeds, 2 cloves of garlic roughly chopped, the zest from the lime, and then I'm going to juice half the lime right into here. This is another one of those tools that I use all the time, but you can also just use a fork. That really helps to get the juice out of a lime or a lemon or whatever you're juicing. Then you want to add a generous sprinkle of salt and some pepper. And then if you're using lettuce like I did and you don't have an herb in there, you might want to add something just to give it a little more flavor. I'm adding some chilies just for a little spice. You could add some cumin or coriander. You could add oregano or basil, just depending on what you want it to taste like. So throw in something like that, and then you're going to blend it until it's all chopped fine. So I find as I'm going that I do need to scrub down the sides periodically as I am chopping, just to get everything chopped up finely. That's not chopped fine enough. So once everything is chopped up fairly fine, then you're ready to drizzle in the olive oil. So anywhere between 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup for this much greens, and just keep an eye on it. And you can make it as loose or as thick as you want. So more oil makes a looser pesto, more oily pesto, less oil makes it sort of thicker and sticking together a bit more. So the trick for this is you're actually going to let the food processor run as you drizzle in the olive oil. And we have pesto. Might just give that another scrape and one more run through just to make sure it's well combined. But basically, pesto is this yummy, delicious green sauce that you can use in so many different ways. I usually give it a taste, and sometimes after tasting it, I decide it might need a little more lime juice if you want to brighten up the flavor a little bit. Maybe it needs a little more spice if you want to spice it up. Maybe it needs a little more garlic. So at this point, taste it, add a little something if you think it needs it. Maybe it needs salt or pepper. So just kind of balance those flavors until it's good, and then you are ready to enjoy it. As I said before, this freezes well, so if this is too much for you to use all at once, throw some in a jar, put that in the freezer. You can pull it out later. And I hope you enjoy your pesto. Here's our roasted radish and potatoes out of the oven, so you can see how they got nicely browned and delicious. And there's our pesto all finished. So those are recipes for this month. I hope you're enjoying the produce in your box, and please let us know, what are you making with your produce? Leave that in the comments below, and we will see you next month.